Boom. All right. Well, what's up, everybody? We're back with another quick impromptu podcast here. We're back with a CTG podcast. I think this is episode 9 of this season. Not that that matters, but what we're going to be talking about today is basically the current state of affairs with law enforcement training and why it needs a serious upgrade. And today I have Wayne here. Wayne is a very serious, we'll call it military law enforcement side of things. Not that he doesn't compete, but we figured we had the perfect kind of crossover, and I'd bring him on and we'll talk about some of this. So how you doing, Wayne? Go ahead and let everybody know who you are, what you're about.
Hey, Sam. Yeah, my name is Wayne. I am the founder and owner of GRMTAC, which used to be short for Green Monster Tactical. We named it after the big snowman suit type plate carrier, soft armor combinations that they used to have us wear before we went to the modern style of armor. I did about 7 years as a detective in New Jersey and another almost 9 with the FBI in New York, all in counterterrorism. My Jersey experience was narcotics, fugitives, major crimes, burglary, sex crimes, everything you could think of. The FBI side was more focused. I was a firearms instructor with both the state and the FBI, and a defensive tactics instructor with both. So I've got some experience about law enforcement training and where there are a lot of gaps. And I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, I like that too, because now what I see is with your company, because I know a bunch of your guys that, like Daryl specifically, I've trained with for a long time, and he was the one that was like, "Hey, man, let's kind of like link up and talk about this." And I love it because you guys came from your side of things and kind of found your way into the competition side. So I could start to be like, "Hey, I didn't pull you here. I didn't like twist your arm and be like, you got to start shooting matches. You on your own, like you see the state of training, you see the state of shooting, you see all the performance. You were an instructor yourself, and you find your way into shooting matches. And I find anybody who's kind of serious about this, that is pretty true.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's very easy, I would say, for law enforcement and military to not compete, right? Because we are in the echoiest of echo chambers where everyone has similar experience. Everybody learns from the ground up. So you really don't ever think about venturing outside.
Yes.
You know, you figure, I
Oh, yeah.
mean, I thought I was a great shooter because that's what the people around me told me. And the way they quantified being a great shooter was, oh, you get 100 on your quals. Okay,
Yes.
that's all we knew. We didn't
Yep.
know that there were people running around shooting, for a hit factor and times and accuracy and knocking down steel plates or anything like that existed.
Yep.
Obviously, it's way more popular now, but even back then, I mean,
Yeah.
law enforcement was its own unique training animal.
Yes. Separate.
And everything we do was basically what we invented. And there were very few targeted drills. There was very
Yes.
little in the way of performance improvement, right? You learn how to shoot, and that's how you shoot.
Yes. Marksmanship, 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 which is good because, like, I don't want police to miss things. But once you kind of build up your marksmanship side of things, ironically, myself, like being we'll call it a performance firearms trainer, marksmanship is the first tier of 3 tiers that I basically go through that you have to have your marksmanship to start doing the rest of it. But that right there is like learning to just do an air squat. You know what I mean? It's not even like it's a foundational thing that you're required to go forward, but it by no means means you're strong or fit yet, right? You can do an air squat. It doesn't mean you're strong and fit yet, but it's the basis of the movement you're going to use later on. You need that marksmanship. The problem, as you said, it's an echo chamber, and police, generally speaking, anybody, I don't want to fault police, but anybody inside their own sport, they don't tend to look outside it. They hold themselves to the standards within. And like you said, if one guy's a good shooter, they all ask him, but they don't look outside. And that's where I kind of got obsessed with this whole thing. I got into this in a very weird way. I was just a civilian trying to play gun games. And what did I find is there's no good training for the gun game. So I was trying to get trained. And this is 2012, 2010. I was trying to get trained by guys like you. And then I'd show up at the matches that I was actually trying to shoot. And there was like this big gap forming, like there wasn't anything. So once I figured out the way and hit A class, I started to teach. But what's funny is competitors didn't come to find me at first. Like, I'm an A class shooter. Who cares? Oh, nobody wants to find me. You know who I started teaching full time initially when I started my company was police officers. I found that police officers, but not just a new police officer. I was getting guys that were in a gunfight already. I was getting guys who were the head of whatever tactic team on their I was getting SWAT guys. I was getting guys who were actually out doing things. And what I came to find from these guys is they started to quantify time as an equally important part next to the marksmanship. Yes, marksmanship's a big deal, but time's a big deal. You could explain that all you want to people until you've either hit a buzzer in their ear or, less fortunately, they've been shot at and they realize how important time is. And that's where I started to really value this hit factor training, not just for, I love the gaming side of things, I'm a gamer, but I value the hit factor training for the same way we value general health and fitness. The more generally health and fit you are, the better police officer you'll be, right? Now, I look at health and fitness the same way. It's very simple, but it's not easy. Do I want to get up at 6 o'clock, go to the gym, and not eat pork roll? No, I don't want to do that. It's the easier thing to do, just like it's easier to do a qual and not go and do other things. But to get the results, to get the thing I want out of life, to get the high performance out of life, it takes a little bit of sacrifice. Is it difficult? It's not easy, but it's simple, right?
Yeah.
So I find that
And I think,
marksmanship was the strength side of things. That was guys going and building up their biceps, right? But then they weren't worried about mobility. They weren't worried about endurance. They weren't worried about other things. And while it's important to be strong, there's other things that make you a fit person, right? So I found that shooting was kind of the same thing, right? And you could probably say, like, what do the cops value? Slow, accurate fire, right?
yeah, and I think slow, accurate fire because accountability is drilled into us
Yes.
in terms of you're responsible for every round that you fire, so you better make sure that you don't miss,
Mm-hmm.
however much time that takes. But the guys who probably came to you early on were guys that realized quickly, got a peek behind the curtain, and said, "Listen, this slow, accurate, precision fire trying to put a bunch of
Uh-huh.
shots in the exact same hole is not going to help me survive a gunfight. It's not going to help me survive any of the situations that I've been in." And if you start to get into some proactive law enforcement where you're chasing down really, really bad people, which is a lot of what we spent time doing, you quickly realize you have to be fast and accurate, and you can't slowly
Yes.
draw a firearm and do this whole relaxed set of motions that you've been taught,
Mm-hmm.
because you're immediately gonna feel like, oh my gosh, this is not gonna work and I'm gonna die. So benchmarking in law enforcement is not really a thing, right? Each agency has its own standards, has its own quantification of what's good and what's bad. They don't really collaborate, and they don't really go outside and look at, well, what is everyone else doing? What is the military doing? What are competition shooters doing? Are we holding our own? Are we keeping up with the pace? That's
Yes.
not really a thing in law enforcement because it's government mentality, right? Just move the rock forward, keep
Mm-hmm.
going, keep doing the same things you always did. And there's not a lot of, you don't get extra pay for innovation. So there has to be an accountability on the individual who wants to get better. That's how competition, speed, accuracy, those things start to creep in because somebody says, look, this qual is not making me better. I want somebody who can make me quantifiably better. So they seek out someone like you, and you teach them more about speed and accuracy. And hey, I'm not telling you not to be accountable for your
Mm-hmm.
shots, but there's a better, more effective, faster
Bingo.
way to do this and still be accurate.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things that we miss is this qualification. What is it? A lot of people think that qualification for law enforcement is designed to help you win a gunfight. It is not. Okay. Qualification is a course designed by a lawyer, not the head of your agency, to minimize the risk and liability associated with you carrying a gun. So qualification is just enough training so that your family can't sue if you die in a gunfight for training
I
negligence.
love
That's
that.
all it is. It's
It's
not a
funny.
performance enhancer.
That's one of the very first things I have written down, and you literally nailed it. Is I talk about all the time with people. What's the difference between quals and performance shooting? Because I deal with SWAT and with law enforcement, but I deal with a lot of CCW guys. Right in New Jersey, we're doing a lot of quals now. So I'm dealing with a lot of these guys, and I talk about the qualification is good. What this is a set of standards that says you do have the necessary marksmanship to not miss. And we're not talking about underperformance or stress. We're just saying you have the necessary skill set to put bullets in a responsible direction. That's it. That's all. That's all it is. It's like the driving test. You've all taken your driving test. When you left the driving test at 16, Did you feel like you were ready to jump on the parkway? No, you're right. Like it didn't feel good, right? But you had a license. You were bare minimally trained. We have that kind of thing in this country where we need a level of training so that people can just like head out with guns. We need a benchmark, but we all need to also understand benchmarks aren't a finish line and have nothing to do with performance. So you just said it. Once I'm done with my qual, that just demonstrates to the lawyers that I could put bullets down in the right way. I'm not going to shoot the guys to my left and right, and I know how to use a gun. Performance and qualifications are two entirely different things. They just are. And while quals might need to be there for the lawyer side of things, because it is a government job, I understand. You might have to do a qual twice a year. I don't want the qual. Maybe the qual should be the first 10 minutes of a 2-hour training session, right? If you don't pass the qual, you don't get to come play with the rest of us. But if you do a qual, that should basically be like, all right, now let's start going fast and let's see what goes on, because you kind of mentioned it already. What the problem is the training that law enforcement receive doesn't support the end use. So slow fire accuracy is not the end use when somebody jumps out of their car and starts chasing you down. That's a retreating bill drill, right? That's a USPSA metric that everybody uses online. But I have actually somebody just tagged me in the video, and I'll try, if I remember and I'll edit it into this actual podcast. But
who are you? What's it gonna? Damn it! Get on the ground!
the video was flipping back and forth between USPSA drills and officers doing the exact same motions, shot counts, reload, using cover, using walls. It just turns out that high level use of guns, high level skills, it's all the same. We just play a game with cardboard and steel that mimics the arbitrary scenarios you might face. That's it. We have a way to score and time it. We have a way to have some accountability there. That's what hit factor is all about. And that's what I think police end up kind of looking over. They see us shooting real fast and they see all this stuff. And they're like, how the hell? There's no way he's seeing that fast. There's no way he's shooting that fast, because they don't know what they're seeing. They don't know what they're doing, right? What performance shooters learn to do, what I've learned to do, is you go to the range, like you go to the gym, and you fail upward, right? That's the one thing that police aren't comfortable doing. They need to have 100% accountability all the time. Well, in my style training, accountability, you don't need to hit a target to be accountable for that shot. If you knew you missed the round, and let's be very clear, it's safe, right? If there's a USPSA target and I'm aiming for the alpha and I know it was a Charlie, that's still accountability. But I did accountability faster. And now I can learn to be accountable faster. And now without that push to these police, they don't understand the speeds that are going to be required for you to be accountable and accurate on the street. You need to probably push to 120% of that in your training so that you're overly prepared when it happens. I look at it just like gym. Like, why do you want to have a 500-pound deadlift? So it's easy to pick stuff up. I don't intend to go around picking up 500 pounds all day long, but I know if I'm nice and strong and I'm mobile and I'm fit, it's easy to pick up my child, right? If I know I can run a 4.440, I can get away from people. I'm not trying to run a 4.440. I can run faster than the next guy, right? Now, I also will say that means if I have 120% of the necessary speed and skill, what happens under stress? You lose up to 20 to 30% of your, we'll call it your sterile skill set. So if I can train to 120% of the necessary speed, I will actually be at an appropriate level of training when I am faced with reality as a police officer. I am a martial artist as well, or I was a martial artist. I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. And one of the big things that was always beaten into my head is you will fall to your lowest level of training. And if your lowest level of training is slow fire accuracy, you're either going to do that and panic and it's not going to work, or you're going to try to go fast. That's not going to work and you're going to panic, right? But if you know how to shoot quick shots, call shots, do transitions, lead with your eyes, do all that stuff at the speed of sight, as I say, I've tested it where I'll shoot a USPSA stage and I'll kind of get some of my metrics. And then I live a weird life. I've got a shoot house that I can go right from my range down to the shoot house. And I've gone and played force on force drills with people. And from what I found, a master class level and beyond in shooting is faster than necessary to save your own life. I could make very easy face shots at splits that would be slow in the competition world. Right. So I start to find that the using competition kind of reframes what is performance to me, and it makes it easy. I want my police officers to be 150% as good as everybody on the street. Why wouldn't you guys play games? Why wouldn't you use games to do that? Right. Why wouldn't we use the sport?
Yeah, and I think that's where you get some resistance, right? Because one of the things I'm keying in on that you said is that when they watch you shoot competitions, police officers, some military, they don't know what they're seeing,
Yes.
right? And that's where the resistance comes in, is that when you're trained and used to firing slow, you equate fast with reckless.
Yes.
And you equate fast with a complete lack of accountability or a complete lack of threat assessment.
Yes.
Now, the problem is that's not necessarily true, because you can slow down as needed. If you have an upper limit to your speed of execution, you can't go past that. So if you're used to shooting really, really slow, when you try to shoot faster, yes, you will lack accountability. You will lack proper execution. However, if you train to do things faster, obviously you have better, what I like to refer to as bandwidth, where you can use all of it if you need it, or you can just dial it back to 80%, 60%, whatever the situation dictates, and go as fast as necessary, just to be fast enough to be faster than the other person that is your adversary, right? So you can use as much of your bandwidth as you need for skill execution. But if you don't have any, you can't create it on the spot.
Yep, that's a big deal. And that's the thing, is if you don't understand what shooting at quarter second splits are, you don't realize, oh, I can see that fast. It's not some dude in short shorts and Crocs just ripping on a trigger. What you learn by ripping on that trigger and by pushing that speed, you learn to, like you said, increase your bandwidth. You learn what my big, especially through the winter when it's just too crappy for me to shoot in the Poconos, I have that VR system now, or I'm dry firing, because my only thing is trying to make my brain and my eyes work faster, because my body, I always joke, pretty easy to shoot at the speed of trigger, right? You could just rip on triggers. I don't need any speed training in my body. This isn't the problem. I need to be able to maintain a grip, and my brain and my eyes need to move faster, work faster, think faster, see faster, be accountable at better speeds. How do you do that? You train at those speeds and you learn to reel it in. And that's where police are very uncomfortable, because they're trained for 100% accountability accuracy. Yeah, sure, for a qual. But I want you to fail in training like I want you to fail reps in the gym. I want you to get to a point of failure, so you understand that's my upper limit. What can I do to affect this upper limit so that I have a higher upper limit and a higher upper limit, and we can keep pushing that along? I always make this example too, because I moved up to the Poconos to pursue this whole like shooting for a living, and I moved out of Jersey to get away from people a lot, so I thought. And within 3 months of me moving up here, I had to draw on somebody in my front yard. Emotionally disturbed person. He had a machete, and he was running at me. It was June. He had a hoodie on, hood up, mask on, gloves. It was pretty clear cut that I was clear to draw my firearm, right? There's a whole story leading up to it. I won't waste time. But by the time I realized this was going on, what happened to me was I'm standing in my front yard. I have my truck somewhat between us, and I'm looking at a guy who is screaming violence at me. And the only thing that's going in my head is, well, his back is to my neighbor's house. If I take shots, I'm going to hit my neighbor's house. I'm going to have to step to the left and draw. So I'm making a stage plan. Because if I shot at him right there, I'm getting DQ'd. I know that sounds like I'm simple. I'm drawing weird comparisons here, but this wasn't a tactical defensive. It was time. It was the beep was about to go off. When's the beep about to go off? I don't know, because he hasn't stepped into my yard yet. I know the beep's going to go off when he has entered my yard. All right. So I have a stage plan. I have a beep. I have a target. What's my target? It's not just him. He had a zipper down, and I had a spot picked. So what's cool about all this is I needed to shoot him as quickly as humanly possible. He had a dog with him too, so I didn't want him to close the gap. Well, he entered my yard. The beep went off. I drew my gun hard and fast to the spot that I picked. You know what happened? When I started drawing my gun, he shit his pants and he dropped to the ground. So I drew my gun. I don't have a spot there anymore. So I used 100% of my bandwidth, but my bandwidth is speed of sight, not speed of trigger. So I drew out. I looked for my spot. Wasn't there. It was on the ground. I didn't shoot shoulder blades, right? I'm not going to shoot a white target in our world, right? We see drop turners all the time. I'll shoot a piece of steel and this turner will go brown, white, brown, white. I'm not just going to shoot at motion, right? I'm not even just going to shoot at brown. I'm going to shoot at the center that I picked at brown, being very specific, right? I'm going to be as accurate as I can quickly. Those abilities, like all those things, kept me from shooting somebody who I shouldn't have shot. It kept him alive. The police came and picked him up. He is gone forever because that was like the second or third time he had done something stupid. I'm not a murderer. He's alive. Everybody's cool. And I didn't do anything tactical. It was 100% my gamer brain kind of like computing against not going to jail, right? That's it. I'm a civilian. That's how it works. Now, most people are civilians training, and I even go to the police officers, and all I need my police officers to do is everything I just said. It's USPSA plus your SOPs. That's it. Because what does USPSA? Follow the rules, be efficient, score as many points as possible. Don't break the rules. I say don't break the rules twice, right? Because your rules might be a little bit different. We have like the general safety rules in USPSA, but then add your police SOPs, and now you're going to be as efficient as you can shoot using the USPSA concepts. But I'm always going to filter them through the SOPs of my police, and I'm not going to get in legal trouble, right? And now I'm going to shoot as efficiently as I can and not get in trouble at the same time. What's the loss, right? I kind of joke at that point, there's not tactical shooting or defensive shooting. Shooting is shooting. Getting up to the shooting is where tactical and defense stuff comes in. But if we're in a gunfight, your tactics suck already. Like, I'm a big fan of your tactics are wrong if you're experiencing return fire. So tactics are over. It's time to shoot. Who's going to be the better shooter? Higher hit factor wins. Every single time. Higher hit factor wins. I'm not asking you to shoot fast without points. I'm asking you to have a higher hit factor, which means high speed and high accuracy at the same time. So is every gunfight a race? 100% it is.
Yeah.
Right? 100% it is. So if you don't train racing with your gun and you think you're going to get into a fight, I hear it the same way as that guy who's like, oh, I see red and I'm going to fight everyone in this, but he's 300 pounds and he's never fought a day in his life. I'm like, dude, you're not trained for any of that. You could say this all you want, but like, you're not, what's going to happen is some 120-pound jiu-jitsu guy is going to break your arm off and you're going to be mad about it. So it's interesting because I look at it the same way as fighting now. Jiu-jitsu is a good example because the police are big into jiu-jitsu, right? Do you guys train and offer that kind of stuff?
We do personal and advanced defense, but that is a mix of more simple techniques in terms of I've been doing Muay Thai for about almost 25 years. And then I had probably 7 or 8 years of experience in, Machado Jiu-Jitsu, Junfan Jeet Kune Do, Silat, Kali, a bunch of different arts.
I love this.
We try to kind of extract very simple concepts for personal defense that people can't mess up. Because after living down at Quantico for 6 months and seeing people taught like jujitsu escapes that had like 4 components to them and not be able to remember them and just F them up horribly after living with these things for 18 hours a week of training. And then when we get into force on force, they're like, oh, I forgot to trap the leg. Oh, I forgot to trap the arm. And so I said, okay, it's got to be much more simple than that. But so we do offer personal defense, but we try to simplify it. And like you said, the biggest question I get from people is, well, what do I do if somebody just jumps on me? I said, okay, if somebody just jumps on you, and that's the first clue that you get that something's wrong, again, your tactics suck. You missed a lot of cues on the way, and we need to back up to pre-conflict. We need to back up to situational awareness and start from the big circle where you're aware of your surroundings, then get into the smaller circle where you're aware that something doesn't feel right, but nothing's gone wrong yet, and how to address that. And then if those things don't work and don't save you and don't get you out of the situation, then we can talk about what happens. What do you do physically when somebody tries to engage you? Mm-hmm. But let's not miss all the clues leading up to that situation in the beginning. And like you said, for your situation, I commend you. I think you handled it marvelously. And that speaks to bandwidth from repetition, because if you dropped in someone who didn't have your amount of practice and experience, more than likely what they would see or what they would experience is someone's coming up their yard with a machete is 100% oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Yep.
And maybe not even a draw, maybe just complete freeze maybe
That
flight.
bystander bias, just like, no way, no way, no way. Yeah, because I said this, I was talking to the police, and the police, they don't know who I am. Like, they don't know that I'm trained. Like you said, they don't, that guy's lucky. He's not dead because of me. A less trained guy probably would have killed the guy. And I'm in Pennsylvania, probably would have gotten away with it. I don't want to murder anybody, right? And I had this discussion with the police that were there. I was like, yeah, a less trained guy probably would have shot him. Or what I see is the reason the guy panicked is because when I decided to draw my gun, it was a boom, and like, get out of here. I put the gun in his face, and I watched him kind of like, what the hell just happened? Well, if you don't have the ability to draw violently and you're, no, he'll just run you down. Or he would have let his dog go. It would have been a bigger problem, right? So I find that all those things are probably why, like, my high level, having more than necessary skill actually kept me from needing to shoot him. And I say this because I look at my police. The reason I asked about the martial arts side of things is because if I hear you have a Kali background and all this stuff, right? And next to you is a guy that's this big and he takes anabolics and he's got a big beard, he's covered in tattoos. I'm still picking you all day long because you have the technique to fight. I am going to take the guy who's good at fighting, even in a game, even in a mat, even in an arena. Why? You've pressure tested this before. You fought, you know how to do all this. You have the skills. You have, by the way, if you've ever done fighting, you have a better ego and you have a better brain in your body than somebody who just thinks he's tough and won't test it. I think getting tapped out is a good thing for your soul. I think it's a good thing to get beat up every once in a while in a controlled fashion. That's why I think doing martial arts is a good thing for people. Get your ass handed to you by somebody with better technique. But if I'm going to pick any day long, like, if I'm going to pick the guy who can't fight or the guy who is a professional boxer to back me up, I'm always going to pick the guy who, it's a sport, right? He's never been in a bar fight, sure, but he's punched some people in the face before. I'm picking that guy. That's why the USPSA thing is so big to me. While I might have not applied the blood into people, I don't want to. That's my whole point. I'm trying to not kill people. I think that's a good thing to be. But I've done all the necessary action skills, and I have measurably above the necessary skill set to deal with the gunfight. I think that's simple to say. Why wouldn't you take the guy with the skill, like the measurable skills? Don't take it. I don't want a guy who just thinks he's tough. We all know those guys. It doesn't matter, right? I think jiu-jitsu is a great example of that too, because technique, if you're of equal skill set, technique wins every single time, right? It's not who's tougher. It's not who's harder. It's technique. It's what is technique built out of? Training, practice, in my words, dry fire, right? Drills, going to the range and stuff like that. I'd take that guy all day long over the officer who bought $100,000 worth of cry gear and tells me he's prepared because the internet tells me he's prepared, right? I don't care about, I have these conversations with, like, I call them the Reddit Bravo groups, right? Like, tells me all the gear and all the things I need to win a gunfight, and the guy hasn't left his basement before. I'm like, it's a little silly, right? So I find this is interesting because my big thing is all I want to do in guns in general. If you're going to say I work with the gun and I use a gun to a high level of performance, I want the police, I want everyone to just simply start applying hit factor to their training. Pretty simple, right? I don't want the qual to just be 60 out of 60. If it's 60 rounds, what's the minimum time it should take? Take this minimum rounds divided by the time, there's your hit factor. And then you could say, hey, everyone should be able to hit a 5 hit factor. Go fast, go slow. It's up to you. But I want you to start to say then, hey, if you hit a 5 hit factor, the next qual, I want you to do a 6 hit factor, which is interesting because there's a lot of these guys who could just shoot 60 out of 60 every time, right?
Right. And that's one of the big problems with qualification is that there's no evolution,
No
there's no
progression.
advancement,
Yeah.
there's no challenge. You could logistically shoot 100 your first qualification in law enforcement, and then 20 years later, you're shooting the same course at the same speed. Oh, you got 100 again.
Good for you.
Congratulations. You're a great shooter. There's no advancement of skill. And this is where the federal agencies are a little bit ahead, not very far, but one of the best things that ever came out for us was that the FBI Ballistics Research Group did a study, and I want to say it was back in the late 90s, where they validated that if you didn't train at least once every 3 months, 4 times per year, your skill level with firearms would consistently decrease year over year, and you get worse and worse. So that's why all federal agencies ended up qualifying 4 times a year. And it's every 3 months. Now, people didn't even stick to that in the beginning. It was people would show up to qualify in December and say, hey, I need to shoot all 4 for the year because I never made it out here.
Yeah,
So then they had to start threatening people with taking away their guns if they didn't get out at least
of
once every
course.
3 months. Sounds crazy to people like us that you're only going to shoot once every 3 months,
Yeah.
but that's like the minimum required standard to keep your mechanics up. So that's what we encourage people. Look, if you aren't highly invested in training and you're not going to come out every month or dry fire every week or something like that, you've got to be touching the gun, doing mechanics at least every 90 days to maintain whatever skill level you currently have. It's not going to make you better. It's
But
only
you
going
won't
to
get
prevent
worse.
you
Yeah.
from getting worse. If you want to get better, obviously you've got to train more.
Yeah. And that's why I like the game side of things, because we encourage dry fire and everything. But what I find is like having to put myself in the mindset of like violence and killing and all this kind of stuff. It's not like it's just taxing. It's just like too much thought where I don't need to have all that thought involved in just trying to increase my mechanics. So making it a game, just like making jujitsu a game instead of making it a fight for my life, even though we're working on the same mechanics and same metrics, it frees you up in a very psychological way. We've talked about this on a previous podcast, me and Rob Epifania. It's there's a concept in
Rob's so fast. It's ridiculous.
I love that guy. And he's a great we were talking about it with the Ace VR because there's this concept of free play that human beings learn very, very well from knowing what to do and using like scrimmaging, free play, going and playing basketball, like pick up basketball. I played lacrosse, like going and playing pick up lacrosse, right? That was a way of learning. And I find that dry fire and the game, the USPSA, is that structured play. It's a way for you to have fun using the skills and actually increase your skills, but have a good time doing it and not have to take some emotional toll, not have to be like, oh, I got to strap on myself. But no, man, it's just supposed to be fun. It's fun time. Just get it in your brain that, hey, this is just cool. And then 15 minutes a day, every day is not unattainable, right? It's not unattainable for you to pick up a gun. You don't have to put your whole rig on and put it. No, man, pick up your gun for 10, 15 minutes a day. I have my little dry fire mag. Pop that thing in, take some clicks at the walls, right? You're good to go. Get that bandwidth running, get your eyes running. And then my other thing too is I like to tell people to dry fire when you like specifically don't want to. Dry fire right after the gym. Dry fire first thing in the morning or right before you go to bed because you're probably going to be in a gunfight when you don't want to be. So you should be pretty good at just like executing whatever skill when just at any time, not when you're at your best, at your favorite. I don't want you to warm up. I just want you to 15 minutes a day, pick up your stuff and play with it. The analogy I draw is, do you ever play like a sport in high school, like a varsity sport?
Basketball.
So perfect. Was the best kid on the team? Didn't he have a basketball with him like an annoying amount of time?
Oh, yeah.
So I always remember his name was Mason. He now plays professional. He's in the NFL, but he was like our best guy who played football for us. And he would just walk around the hallways with the football and he'd pass it off while he's like passing people in the hallway and he'd spin move people. And like, it was silly, but he touched the ball so much all day, every day. It wasn't weird to him. And he beat the crap out of everybody. My best friend who went to college for lacrosse, one of my best buddies, like he just always had a fucking stick with him. It was always in his hand. He could put it in both hands at any time. It's not a mystery that then he was more proficient with that stick. So I tell all my police officers, don't let some kid playing a varsity sport play with his tool more than you play with a tool that you think you're going to save somebody's life with. Really, like you think you're going to have a gun on you and you're just going to keep it on your hip. Meanwhile, some kid's going to go out and shoot hoops 10 minutes a day every day. He's going to take basketball more seriously than you're going to take gun training, man. And that's where they start to go, oh, okay. All right, I can't make any more excuses about that. Like, that's not cool. Because I'm not asking you to go to the range every day. I'm asking you to pick up your gun for 15 minutes a day and shoot it at a wall. Zip, zip, just click some triggers.
I think that the free play aspect is underrated because I know that law enforcement shies away a lot of times from doing force on force because it might be airsoft and, oh, well, we shoot real bullets. But what they don't realize, and this plays large on both the law enforcement or the shooting side and the martial arts side. When you can reduce the consequences and make things into a game, you can get more repetitions,
Exactly.
you can take more chances, and you can solidify your skills in a way that you can't do it when the consequences are high. So, like when we spar in Muay Thai, I get a lot of students who ask me, it seems like you see everything coming. What's going on with that? I said, well, it's because I built up the bandwidth. When you attack me, I'm not panicking. I know what I can do, and I'm using more of my bandwidth to focus on what you're doing and how I'm going to respond than the bandwidth that takes up the oh shit, here he comes part. right? So the more we can lower the threshold of those consequences and make you comfortable to execute,
Mhm.
the better you will be over time because you're going to get more reps. I tell people, if you're going to spar at 90%, 100%, and go balls to the wall, how many rounds are you going to last?
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
four, five,
and somebody's
six.
going to get hurt. Like you're gonna
Right.
devalue your training because you're going to now have an injury.
And you're going to be in survival mode because every hit has the potential to knock your head off or
Mhm.
make you dizzy. And you're going to use more resources faster. You're going to blow through your gas tank faster. You're going to suffer consequences. You're going to be afraid. You're going to be gun shy. You're going to be worried more than anything else about making a mistake or getting hit or doing the wrong thing. Now, we lower that to 50%. How many rounds can you do? Probably 10, 12, 14, maybe
Yeah.
20, right? If we're not killing each other, we can experience more skill development. Now, how many more reps are you going to get in those 20 rounds than you got in those 5 rounds? You're going
Very
to see
meaningful, thoughtful, because you're not in panic mode. Yeah.
exactly. You're going to see hundreds more punches, hundreds more kicks, more of everything. So you're going to get used to it. You're going to get inoculated from that stress. Oh, I see a kick coming. It's not going to kill me, but I've seen this thing happen 30 or 40 times already.
Yep.
So same thing with shooting. If you can lower the threshold, yeah. Imagine if we trained on two-way ranges with live fire and people were really getting shot. How good could we get? Probably not at all, because nobody's coming out from
Everybody
behind
be, yeah,
barricades.
no,
Nobody's going to take any chances. Nobody's going to do anything. Probably most people are not even going to show up to train because they're like,
bingo.
"F that, I'm not getting shot today."
Bingo. Yeah. So
So if
it's
we
funny
can,
because like I've never been downrange and I'm happy about that. I'm a civilian. I never signed up for anybody. I've never signed a contract. That was never my MO. So I'm not playing tough guy. That's why I'm a competitor. Like I might teach guys who do use pistols in work to use pistols, but that's because I'm just a subject matter expert with a pistol. I'm not teaching people how to like kill people. Right. So it becomes interesting to me where I, I'm just I'm just out here playing a game, getting reps, increasing my bandwidth. And then I find that comment pops up all the time. Every time I have a YouTube video that goes viral of just me shooting a match. Oh, well, you wouldn't be able to do that if somebody's shooting back at you, Sonny. Oh, it's nice when there's a blah, 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 blah. And I understand what you're saying, but my point is if you added rounds coming back at me, I'd act a lot different. I wouldn't run around with my gun up and out, right? I'd act a little bit differently. All we're doing right here is saying take away the threat of being hurt or injured. Who has the highest marksmanship skills, right? Instead of having to spar with a partner who can hit this bag combo as perfectly as possible, right? That's what we're doing. We're basically like we're hitting bags. That's the way I look at it, right? Bags all over the place, but like that's we're hitting bags. Nobody's striking back at us. Now that said, I've gone and played with a lot of these SWAT units. I've gone down to Quantico, ironically, and gone and played with people who I'm not supposed to be there. Like I signed a thing that you are not here. And I go downrange, and here's a blue pistol. We're gonna roll a 4-man team at you. That's the only information they give you. Like, go hide in this building. So it's legitimately Sam versus Bravo team. And you know what happens the first 3 reps? Smoke them every single time. I'll walk 4 people into a room and I'll smoke 4 people. And then they'll learn me and they'll start to, and we'll learn and we'll start to do and training and I'll teach them how to beat me and we'll do some learning. But the thing is I've never been in a gunfight before. I've drawn a gun one time over there on a person. That's the only time I've ever done it. Like I've never been in, I've fought. I'm from New Jersey. I'm an Irish Italian from the 90s in New Jersey. I've been in plenty of dust ups, but like I've never been in like a life threatening altercation, but I know how to use the gun fast and mean, we'll say, right? So one of the things I'll do is I'll let the SWAT teams do their thing, stack up on the door. When they roll through, I could shoot faster than you. I could process faster than you. So if you enter a door at the same time as I see you and you didn't use lights or a flash, I win. My processing's higher than you. I'm going to win the fight. So the first thing I teach them is don't try to get in a gunfight with the guy on the other side of the door. It's stupid, right? Use tactics that get you an advantage. Well, the second thing is just because you have 4 of you doesn't put you in an advantage if all 4 of you are at a low level of skill. Because I'll shoot the first guy, then the second guy, then the third guy, and the fourth guy as they walk through. And then they ask me where I got hit. And I go, first of all, I didn't get hit. Second of all, the fact that you don't know that you missed me is a problem. And that goes back to, hey, call shots. Let's go play a game. I'm going to teach you how to play a game real quick, right? Now, one of the other things I start messing with these guys in shoot houses, and this always pisses them off, but in a very good way, is I'll put myself in a room. There's the door. But what I want is I could see through the door, like a crack in the door like this, and I could see all the way down the hallway. I'll shoot them at 40 yards before they've even breached the room. Because I go, well, this is a game, right? We're playing a game. Right? Would I have to let you start shooting at me to come into no, if I was a dude and I'm sitting here and I see you, so maybe adjust your tactics, right? Maybe don't take it seriously when you're entering rooms and being lazy everywhere else. A third thing that I've done, I'm a gun guy. I have let them come into a room. We call index, I give up. You said Cali, and this is why it's in my head. I have a blue knife in my pocket because I always have knives on me. So when we go to a blue gun, I always put my blue knife in my pocket. And I let the SWAT team take me, right? Whatever. They don't control one arm. And all of a sudden I put a blue knife in 2 SWAT guys. I'm like, oh, man, so you guys aren't really training here, are you? You're acting. You're being really complacent. You're not actually worried about me as a person. You're not training for real. You're not taking me seriously. So you guys are playing a game too, aren't you? This is a game. This is a game to you. Why don't we up the stakes of the game? Why don't we make the game a little bit better then if we're just going to play a game here? And if I, as a civilian USPSA shooter who just plays with knives, can roll over SWAT teams and stab people and kill people in a hand-to-hand, like 4-on-1 scenario, that should bother them. And it did. And now they train. And these are I didn't do it to these guys, but some of the guys I train with are the Secaucus SWAT guys. And if you notice, they are buttoned up now. Like, they will make fun of you if you don't train. If you're a liability, they'll let you know it. Training. Like, they are all hitters. And it's because 6 years ago, I started to make them feel stupid, right? It's not just me, but I was one of the contributing factors to be like, why don't you step it up a little bit, man? Why is some guy in short shorts and Crocs rolling over your SWAT team right now, man? That's not cool. I'm just a competitive shooter. So I like that because the crossover, then you guys see it. Like, hey, I want you to start applying hit factor to everything you do, right? What does that mean? Well, quals are interesting. Or you probably trained in shoot houses, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So typically it's like, hey, we have a scenario. We're going to run a 2-man team through it, and we're going to do that like 12 different times, right? If every 2-man team shoots the perp, doesn't shoot the hostage, and survives, everybody won, right? I have a problem with that. Because somebody did better than somebody else, even if we all won. And us not identifying who had the best way, like who measurably had the best way to do it, how do we learn to do it your way? That's a huge like piece of pie we're leaving on the table. If I can run the same shoot house scenario, I'm just being very broad about this. If there's a shootout scenario and I can do it in 2 minutes and it takes you 15 minutes and we accomplish the same task, why wouldn't you ask me how to do it? But they don't hold these standards. So they're like, hey, you passed, I passed, we're good, right? No, what if we can all operate at the bandwidth that we could clear a shoot house in 2 minutes together safely and efficiently, rather than me being a 2-minute bandwidth, you being a 15-minute bandwidth, and us having a hard time working together, right? Like, there should be benchmarks held on everything. Why they're not is because I don't think they understand the hit factor side of things. All you need to do with hit factor is just start to define a bad guy's worth 20 points. I don't know, a hostage is worth negative 40. And however long it takes me to solve the problem is the equation. It's very, very simple. I want you to solve equations correctly, faster. When you go to solve the equation and you don't do it correct anymore, you've hit a point where you need to work on that speed and bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think that that speaks to the fact that a lot of training has become, quote unquote, gentleman's training, where we want everybody to pass. We want everybody to feel good about themselves. We don't want to be too hard on each other, and we don't want to breed too much competition. But I disagree, right? Competition has to be a bit savage, and we have to identify who did the best, who solved the problem the most effectively. Because when we get to the real world, we're going to have to realize that those seconds and tenths of seconds may matter. Like going back to what you said before, can you do all the things you do in a competition in a live fire 2-way gunfight? Absolutely not. However, a lot of what you develop, a lot of the skills that you master will translate. Speed and accuracy drops into every scenario. There is no scenario where you can be a less accurate, slower shooter and prevail over one who is more accurate and faster than you. So those two skills have to be accountable for translating into the real world.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that and you're not pushing the envelope, and that's one of the issues with law enforcement, is that there's no evolution in training. There's not enough time for training.
You just said something that bothers me. One thing that bothers me, it kills me. And it gets a response out of me when they tell me this. Oh, we had a lot of guys failing, so they lowered the threshold. Oh my good God, why don't we address the training? Or, I know this sounds mean, fire the guys who aren't working as hard as you guys. I think it's sad when 9 guys on the SWAT team are working hard, this guy isn't, and now they cater to this guy. Because it's not that he can't, it's that he won't. And I don't want And it sounds mean. If you want a cushy job, go be an accountant. Don't be a cop. You know what I mean? Like, go, there's remote jobs out there. If you want a job that you don't want to put in the work on the side, don't be a police officer, please, because I'm going to call a police officer for help. I want him to mean it, right? I don't want an accountant coming. I want a guy who's been training to come, right? So I find that it does have to be a little bit of a culture shift, and I find that hit factor training, in my mind anyway, is the easiest way to affect the culture shift without it being mean anymore. It's just like, hey, you need to shoot 60 rounds in 60 seconds, right? Whatever that hit factor is, it needs to be a one hit factor. In this regard, 60 divided by 60 is 1. All right, well, you need to pass this qual with a 1 hit factor or above. What does that mean? Well, if you shoot a 0.9 hit factor, even though you shot 60 per 60, you're not fast enough of an accurate shooter to back up my partner. All right, so we need to start holding yourself accountable to that. Now, you said something about benchmarks. What I like about USPSA, every year we calculate who beat the classifiers, right? If we have 100% threshold and somebody shot at 102%, well, we all look at each other and go, hey, that's what's possible. We recalibrate and we try to catch up with him. We don't ignore that like an outlier. We go, oh, if that's what's possible, let's learn from them and let's increase the actual benchmark. When was the last time police training was like raised? And I don't even want to hate on police. Think about IDPA versus USPSA. The IDPA 5x5 classifier hasn't even been changed in 20 years. So I find USPSA is like leading the charge in, if this is what's possible, it's humanly possible, we're going to hold all of ourselves to that. I think that's perfectly fine, right? I think that's a good way to be. It's accountability. You start to hold yourself to, well, he's a human, I'm a human. How do I do that? He's not special. None of the guys at a top 20 are buying themselves into gear or anything like that. They're using training. They're using the process. They're using hit factor training with everything. That's all they're doing. So if police just simply start adding the word hit factor to most of what they do, set a benchmark and try to beat that hit factor. That's it. The secret now, I don't think it's a secret anymore because I said secret and somebody corrected me on my Zoom call last week. The Marines are now using hit factor scoring. The Marines Qualification started to use hit factor scoring. Now, again, I'm not military or anything, so I don't know when or whatever, but I do know a little background to that is one of the guys that affects the military training, especially the Marine rifle teams. His name is Brian Nelson. Brian Nelson came second overall at PCC Nationals this year, so he's a real good competitor. He's a trainer for the Marines. His dad owns and runs Practice Score. So you want to talk about like the biggest integration of like, okay, the Marines are now upgrading their training and they're upgrading it through the best shooters in the world. It's happening whether you want it to or not. It's happening whether you are ready for it or not. Like it's going to start coming. If the Marines do it and then the Marines beat the Army, you think the Army's going to adopt it? Of course they are. Yeah, they're going to want to uphold it. And I like that, right? They're all going to be like, well, damn, they're crushing us now. So let's start doing that, right? So it's cool that I think hit factor training, not only is it like my theory, it's out there now. Marines are using it. A lot of guys are using it. There's that guy I always push, X-Ray Alpha on Instagram. I always forget his
Matt Franca.
Matt Franca. So Franca, I take a big deal because he's part of my tribe, by the way. Like in a weird, he's part of SAOC. And we all talk to each other. It's all tribe. SAOC, we fight, stab, and shoot the same mentality, right? And there's a reason that Franca can be a ex-Special Forces and a Grandmaster at the same time, right? Like I start to look at guys like that and go, there's the next step in training, right? There is the next evolution in training is starting to bring both worlds together.
Yeah. And it's funny. I see on social media, people get so mad at Matt because he just isn't afraid to call out bullshit with regard to training, irresponsible training, like the most recent one about guys clearing rooms and clearing facilities with finger on the trigger and safeties off. And you're like, when did this become a thing? And why is the training and the execution so bad that you think you need this type of irresponsible advantage to execute? You don't need it.
I love it because he's been there and he's been downrange, and I love training with those guys because I get to train with guys like Pranka in our tribe. I got to train with guys who are downrange and do all that kind of stuff, and they have a different attitude than all these internet warriors and all these guys who tell me all these things about don't drop your magazine and stuff. Like these guys have put bullets and knives in people, and they laugh at that. Now, the other funny thing that I've come to find is my guys who are Bill Rapier is a good example, very tactically sound, a very tactical defensive-minded guy, but I've shot with him. He could shoot at a master class level on a course of fire. One of the examples I always use is Carl Atienza, the Atienza Kali system. You're a Kali guy. Do you know of Atienza?
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
if you guys listening don't know what I'm talking about, they are the grandmasters of knives. That's the best way to put it. Like they are the best of the best when it comes to knife and knife fighting. Carl, because he understands training and he understands all this kind of stuff, he shoots at a master class level, 100%. He'll come out once a month and he'll shoot a classifier match. He'll be unhappy with an A-class run and lay a master and a close to grandmaster run and then just continue dry firing and training. He's not a gamer or anything like that. He understands the value of it. He understands training. And what I find is the attitude of being a good practitioner with any tool, it starts to be the same across all of the tools. The tool's the only thing that changes. Knife to gun is the only thing that changes. But the mindset, the mentality, the way I train, how I train, that doesn't change. And it's funny to see somebody who could fight at a grandmaster level also be able to game at a grandmaster level. I don't think that's weird. Now, when he hands me knives and I play with knives and trapos with those guys, I could hold my own and I have no idea what I'm doing feasibly. You know what I mean? Like I don't put reps and time in like they do. So I find that there's this weird crossover in this performance world where if you're just good at performing and training, you could apply that to a lot of things, a lot of things. You could apply that to whatever downrange is scaring you, right? I don't care if it's a course of fire or somebody trying to hurt you, but you could start to apply all those things that you learned through play, through structured play. Because you said something about like lowering the threshold of getting hurt. Well, me punching a bob doesn't help. And me knife fighting you with sharp blades is not going to help me learn, right? So what do we do in Kali? We have aluminum fake knives, and you spar at about 70%. So you can learn all these things. It's fun. It's a great time. It's hard. It is. It's very difficult, but it's a game. You're playing a game with the guy. Now, it's a game based in violence. Yes, it's a game based on knife fighting. Still a game. Still a game. Now, the guys who can play those games tend to act better when somebody jumps on them and they need to pull a knife out. So it's cool crossover in all these worlds, because if you think like USPSA is a niche sport, I found that I thought I was, and it was wrong. I was wrong. It's just the highest level of pistol shooting. Like there's a high level of fighting and there's a high level of knifemanship, right? There's a high level of everything. It's just USPSA happens to be the high level of pistol craft, as I call it. Yeah. And I think applying what we know, hit factor and everything, back to the police works. I hold a lot of my police, especially my SWAT guys, to a running clock to increase the time need on their quals. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to start and stop the clock at every line, you have 60 seconds to run this whole qual go. Right? So it's not exactly hit factor scoring, but now I added a time limit to what their accuracy normally is. And now you see some bad shit pop up. You'll see some bad habits pop up. And now we have an opportunity to fix some bad habits that might pop up in a gunfight or in the street. So it's funny because like this kind of stuff is, I could expand on it forever, because this is where I came from. Kind of like when I got into shooting, I didn't know about USPSA. I never got into this to be a USPSA shooter. I was a prepper. I was building ARs and I was collecting Glocks for when the zombies came. I swear to God, I used to be a shotgunner. I just used to be a clay bird shooter. So I used the whole mentality of like, hey, I'm just going to compete with these guns to see how good I am for when the zombies come. I didn't get into USPSA to be a USPSA shooter. What ended up happening is I wanted to become the best with a gun. So I went out there and identified who's the best with the gun and I'm going to learn from him. And it just led me to USPSA. I didn't get into this through attitude. I got into this because those are the guys that I couldn't beat. I would quickly catch and surpass NRA instructors. I'd quickly catch and surpass defensive instructors when they were teaching me things. And that pissed me off. Like, I'm not paying you money if I can outshoot you. I only, like this year, I'm taking classes from Mason Lane and JJ Racaza because I can't beat them. Can't beat them. I can't beat them.
Both of them are extremely fast.
Savages, man. Yeah. And what's crazy about it is they both, I mean, JJ's an air marshal. JJ teaches the air marshals. Mason Lane works up to Team Sig Sauer, and Team Sig Sauer does very little. Like USPSA is an echo chamber. Team Sig and Sig Sauer in general, USPSA is a very small side of it. So all these competitors, all these professional competitors, their real job's just being so good that they can go back and teach their units. That's where it came down to. The AMU guys, what was his name? Daniel Horner back in the day. Daniel Horner was the best 3-gunner there ever was and ever will be. He was just an Army marksmanship unit guy. So it's cool to start to see it becoming popular, though. Like the Marines are becoming hit factor people. You are a great example. Like you are a defensive shooter guy who you could blinder yourself and just talk about triple nickel and defensive stuff, but instead, no, performance, right?
Yeah. And I think that what's being uncovered now is that there are no shortcuts. The people who are the most disciplined and have the most efficient training methods and techniques are going to be better. And there's no secret sauce. No one has like the secret recipe to shooting without getting the proper repetitions and the amount of trigger time on. There is absolutely the tarps have been blown off and everybody can see everything and we know who's better and we know why. So now it's just a matter of, are you going to get on board or not? And if you don't, you're going to get left behind.
And I love it because I appreciate you guys out there who are doing this service, because I know defensive people and military and police, they don't want, they want to learn from somebody who's been there before. And I get that. They want a subject matter expert. And I'm not a subject matter expert in fighting or being downrange. I'm just a pistol shooter, right? So I really appreciate that you guys are taking the opportunity to be like, they want to learn from me because I've been there, but I'm not going to tell old war stories. I'm going to do my people the service of going out there and being better, getting better, and showing them what's out there, and seeing you guys at competition, seeing, because I like I said, Daryl's one of my buddies that I've known for a while, and it's like seeing him be able to teach and then go to competitions and be like, hey man, things go well, things don't go well. I'm going to be here and I'm going to learn too, and I'm going to do all these things. Like, that's more meaningful. I think your kind of companies are going to go way further than the guys who are just teaching old tactics, because we all know how quickly things change. If you're teaching an old war story, you're wrong already. Like, you're already, complacency kills, man. If you're teaching old stuff and you're not looking for new ways, sorry.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's so much more improvement to be done. I mean, there are law enforcement agencies out there who are still teaching shooting with elbows locked, still teaching, some semblance of
Reset,
lever.
click, reset. Yep, yep.
Funny
And it's
story about how isosceles stance, which is now largely abandoned, got incorporated, was that they did some intelligence collection and looked at gunfights. And they found that, oh, well, a lot of these officers are standing with their legs wide, their butts out, crouched down in this weird kind of stance. So, since officers end up there anyway, why don't we just teach it that way? Which is the exact wrong and reverse method to figure out what you need to do. So then they started teaching isosceles. It was terrible. You can't move out of that stance. You can't fight out of that stance. You can't do anything out of that stance. So they quickly learned that, oh, this isn't really viable. Okay, how about this? Let's backtrack and figure out, how did the officers on film get into that stance? Oh, well, because they had very poor shooting technique, very little training, and this was their response to adrenaline and threat. And it was just how they ended up, their natural fight or flight stance, not their trained tactics. So we took raw adrenalized reactions and tried to teach them in a refined technical setting, and it didn't work. So, in other words, what we should have done is looked at, hey, why did these guys end up in this weird, funky stance where they can't really do anything? Let's make sure they don't do that. And
yes.
then it kind of retracted to what you have now, where you have shock absorber techniques, you have more upright stances, you have heads up shooting, and places, techniques that allow you to move and be mobile and fight. I mean, that's what we tell everybody is, if you're going to shoot, stand exactly like you would when you fight. And if you don't know how to fight, go learn.
I like that, man, because it's great. It's right down to the base. It's right down to saying, like, we're gonna have to figure this out from, like, why are you doing, so I have to say this very carefully, because again, I've pulled a gun on somebody, never been in a live fire gunfight, right? Never been a police officer, never been in the military downrange. I get the opportunity to train a lot of these guys. And one thing that's happened twice this season that I laughed about, or twice in the last couple of months, because the year has flipped over. I was teaching a competition fundamentals class, and there's 3 SWAT guys in there. One of the SWAT guys has been on the SWAT team. He's seen some shit. He's been there for 20 years. Like, he's almost retired. He's a younger guy, but he was also in Afghanistan. Like, he's been through some shit. And we finished one of the courses of fire that I had set up, like 32 rounds, 5 positions, moving and shooting, like all that kind of stuff. He finished the final shot. He unloaded and showed clear, and he turned around and he said to me, I am more wound up right now than any other time I've ever been. And he has shot at people overseas and in country. He has been in all these things, and he's like, yeah, it's an adrenaline thing that kicks in. Like, there's a certain fight or flight. It doesn't feel the same. There's not the same pressure to be perfect on me, right? And then I have another buddy, a guy that I teach. He was a Marine. He said the first time he got shot at, of many times, it was middle of the night. He was peeing. and a couple shots cracked off. He didn't even realize he was being shot at. He picked his gun up, he emptied a 30 clip in that direction, and that was his first gunfight. He said, my heart rate wasn't even elevated. I was actually excited to shoot in that direction. I am more nervous to shoot your standards than I ever was in any of the gunfights overseas. And I was like, man, like that makes me feel good, but I wouldn't have been able to say that without hearing this from these guys. So if you think competition's void of pressure and you think you need rounds down range to simulate it, they have told me you don't, and they have experienced both. They just had to mean the training. They had to care about hit factor. They had to care about the training. I can't make you care. But if you care about the training, you care about the sport, hit factor training is good enough. It is. These guys told me it's more than good enough. It actually beyond necessary training. It's harder than any gunfight I was in. Because you're also, I hope you're not going to move between 6 positions and engage 45 people in a gunfight, right? I hope that's not the case. Or you're Delta running through Osama's compound, right? Like, then you're not talking to me. You're some other guy. So it's cool to start to see this come to a head, though. Like, if you could handle pressure, you can handle pressure. If you could shoot to a high level, you can shoot to a high level. If you can't do it consistently and measurably, it's theory. And that's where this comes down is I test theory. That's what my competition is. My theory is this. If I have a hypothesis and I test it enough times and it becomes fact, it's fact. I know it's fact. I don't have to guess anymore. And then I don't have to try to do things. They just work. I will just draw my gun. I will just look where I'd like bullets. As soon as my dot lifts, I will just look where I'd like bullets again, right? It's just a do it thing. It's not a, well, I read on YouTube, so I got to try to do this. And this guy told me to do this. No, it's just a go ahead and do it thing. And there's nothing like subconscious repetition. There's nothing like hit factor. There's nothing like dry fire. So I love this kind of stuff because this is why I got into it. I got into this sport, loved this sport, and then I wanted to coach it because I want shooting in general to be better. I hated where the level of shooting was at. I hated that tactical and defensive and competition had this big gap between us. And it's gotten a lot smaller. It's gotten a lot smaller. The fact that we're sitting here talking about it is huge. The fact that YouTube and everybody's more concerned about like Ben Stoker and performance shooting rather than arguing about tactics, I think that's a big step in the right direction. There's still guys talking about room clearing and all that kind of stuff. But I find that arguing about that is a different argument. The second triggers start to get pulled, we're talking our argument right now. That's all we're talking about. And now more people are starting to realize.
Well, listen, the secret was this, okay? Tactics was the blanket, the safety blanket for people who didn't shoot well. That's all it boiled down to be. Not to say that tactics aren't valid, okay? But when you talk about tactics in an adversarial stance to speed and accuracy, you're just trying to cover over your deficiencies.
Bingo.
That's
Yep.
all it is.
I find they're equal skill sets. They're equally as important because if I'm a GM and I just walk into the center of a room, I don't care how good a shooter I am. That was bad tactics. I'll get shot first, right? But I also say to my cop guys, you're going to tactic yourself into a fucking coffin. If you have all of this cool tactics and you turn the corner and you have D-class level shooting skills, you just theatrically died. You just looked really cool and got shot. Like, cool. So the security camera is going to look awesome, but you still got shot. So I don't find that having one without the other is valuable. That's kind of my big thing. So my tactics support my marksmanship. My marksmanship supports my tactics. I don't want there to be a gap between the two. I want to be a grandmaster at both. Study both, practice both. My tactics as a civilian is don't get in the way of bullets. I think a lot of people miss that. You actually are paid to go down range, right? If you're not being paid to go get in danger and you're arguing tactics with me, I'm done arguing with people. That's the big thing. Especially like, even if you're retired now and you're just a dude civilian and you're arguing tactics with me, we're talking marksmanship. We're only talking marksmanship. I only talk tactics with guys who get paid to do it because otherwise I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I'm not telling you to go operate tactics if you're not backed up by a team in the law. You know, it's not my thing. Do whatever you want. I'm not the lawyer, but it's an interesting way to start to look at it. I'm a civilian, especially from Jersey. What's the tactic in Jersey? Duty to recruit. Sorry. So you're literally waiting for the beep to go off. That's the harshest reality I tell all my CCW people. In New Jersey, you have to be so prepared. You're on standby at all times. You have to wait for somebody to present a weapon, and that's when the beep happened. Or you have to wait for that thing. So you better be a good marksman, and you better be fast at it because you're behind the 8 ball by legal definition, right? There's a lot of arguments about that kind of stuff, and I'm just talking purely from the don't get arrested by Governor Murphy side of things, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where training and competing shows its value, because what people sometimes miss is that stress is stress. And your body doesn't know the nuances between different types of stress. It knows what stress is.
Thank you.
So there's a stress associated with being in an adrenalized confrontation. And there's a stress associated with performing in front of a bunch of people under time pressure where you have to execute. Okay. If you can get used to that, it will definitely cross over in terms of adding to your bandwidth when you're in other
I
types of
like what you
stressful
just said.
situations.
I love that because what I tell people all the time, like you're a meat bag. We are human beings. You're not special. You're going to experience cortisol, adrenaline, and lactic acid buildup. It doesn't matter in which form you receive any kind of adversary. That's what happens. Whether a beep goes off and I'm shooting for hit factor or somebody's trying to choke me to death, that's the physical changes in your body. So if I train to always deal with those three chemicals and deal to perform at my best, no matter what my body chemistry is, it's just science. I can't make it any more mathematical and scientific than that with no attitude involved because it's you can't argue with that. We're meat bags. You don't have a like you just said it perfectly. There's no your body doesn't know the difference between the stresses of fighting and the stresses of a beat. It's just the stress. Your brain might the subconscious is a different thing, but we're talking the adrenaline dump, the cortisol dump, the shaking, right? Like that's it's the same thing. It's going to happen all the time. So, I mean, this is one of those subjects that like it doesn't have an end. It's weird. It doesn't have an end because there's always going to be a gap and I'm always going to it's our job to always try to close the gap, but the good thing is at least these conversations are happening more often and the gap is a lot smaller. I think it's a minority of people now who won't train in the performance side of things who also think they're good shooters. You know, like there used to be a lot more dudes who were just, oh, I can shoot a 60 out of 60 qual. Why would I play that game? I think those numbers are going down a little bit now. It's also a lot more accessible. I mean, how easy is it to find a match now, right?
Yeah.
There's no excuse
Much
for police.
easier.
Yeah, there's no excuse for police and military to not find these matches anymore. Because that was the big reason, or one of the many reasons I do that weekly match. I have a weird schedule. So while I can't shoot on Sundays, I'm also aware a lot of police, you're going to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? You have these 4 days on, 4 days off, or 4 days, 3 days shift. So most police officers that I knew, most guys who worked that I knew, they had a Wednesday or a Friday off. So I started doing matches for you guys. So there's no excuse, right? You military and police guys who are sitting at home who are like, I can't shoot on Sunday because I'm working. Well, I got a match on a Wednesday. You can come shoot now. I'll coach you through it too. You could go to Double Eagle. You can go to 100 different clubs around right now. It's become popular. When I started shooting this, there were 2 matches a month, maybe 3 if you were lucky. Now I think there's like 12 to 15 a month. Like you can't actually physically make it to all the matches. You have to pick which ones you have to go to now. So there's no excuse anymore, man. You can go and train with your team one weekend, and the next weekend you can come play with us USPSA boys, right? Like it's there. It's always there. It's always training. And I find that now even like the USPSA gap of gear is changing. Like I'm a 4-time grandmaster with a Glock, right? How often is that happening now? Pretty normal to see striker fire guns out there, right? Not these big fancy crazy race guns. So hey, we're closing the gap. We're getting there. We're coming. It'll take a couple more years, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of bumps along the road. But I appreciate you coming on and talking about this kind of stuff because generally speaking, everybody thinks the tactical versus competitive side is like an argument, and it's just not for most of us.
Yeah, I think we have to understand that shooting is, like you said, shooting is shooting. And if you want to be better at it, you've got to go where the best people go. One of the things I learned a long time ago was they said that people were going to military guys to get shooting advice. You said, well, where are the military guys going? Well, they're going to the competition guys because shooting for people in the military is one aspect of about 100
Mm-hmm.
different skills that they have to have. But when they
Mm-hmm.
want to refine one skill, they're going to people who just
Coach.
do that thing, which is competitive shooting. Okay, how can I be faster and more accurate? I'm going to go to the guys who are the fastest and the most accurate,
That's it.
not go to guys who shooting is like 10% of their total skill output
Mm-hmm.
requirement.
Subject matter experts, man. That's what I love it. Because if I need to talk tactics, I just pull one of my SWAT guys. Like I'm not going to argue online. I'm not going with anybody. I'm going to ask the last guy who is the second man in the team, and he's done it all week. So I think that seems logical, right? It seems normal when you talk about it like that. But it's cool to hear that now that it's becoming normal. I love to see you guys out there, and then that's the only thing I want to get now. I want shooting is shooting. Once the beep's gone off, we're all playing the same game. How we get to the beep is the big change. That's the big variable there. But once the beep's gone off, hit factor matters. If it's high noon and we're waiting for the chime of that bell and both of our hearts are worth 10 points, it's a hit factor race, man. That guy waiting in that room has a heart worth 10 points and my heart's worth 10 points. It's a hit factor race, man. I want to get to a point where he's not going to be able to see my heart, but it's a race. It's a fucking race, man. So you can talk tactical all you want, but once you start pulling triggers, we're racing. It's on. It's on and rocking. It's like every fight's a fight, right? Like it doesn't, you could be able to vomit me all of the jujitsu moves out there. But if you know the tactic and not the execution, I'll just choke you out. So I'm just going to take your back, man. Right. So it's fun. It's a good way to look at it. But I appreciate you guys coming, you specifically coming on, giving me your time and talking about all this kind of stuff, because as funny as it is, as fun as this is for us and as simple as it is, I think this is the stuff that's going to start to shift the culture towards stop worrying so much about what team you fall into. We're all on the same team. Do it all. Take a class from Wayne. Take a class from Sam. Take a class from, I don't care. Take it all. See what works for you. Find your niche. You know, like I fell into USPSA. I didn't mean to be here. But the last thing I like to say with everything here is if you want to find Wayne, Wayne is one of the guys, really I could say this about anybody I bring on. I'm not going to bring anybody on that I wouldn't go and take a class from, or I wouldn't go learn from, or I wouldn't go shoot from. So if you're looking for Wayne, Wayne, go ahead and tell them where they can find you. I know you're in Jersey, but I don't want to misspeak.
Right. We are in Central Jersey. You can find us. Our social is GRMTAC, GRMTAC on Instagram. We do monthly home defense planning and concealed carry certification courses. Those are usually in Flemington, sometimes in Somerset. We are running Performance 1, which is our first long form full day training course, May 31st. You can find information about that on our socials too. That's going to be a great class because what we're trying to do is level up everyone's performance, whether you're relatively a beginner, whether you're an intermediate, more advanced shooter, and just dial up your speed and your accuracy and your mechanics at close quarters and understand how that translates to precision at distance. We're going to get your speed up at distance and in close.
I love this. So I'm a Jersey guy. I know a lot of my guys were from Jersey. So if you're looking for decent training in Jersey, here's a great option. I love this, the performance training. Now, I also love a home defense training class and the way you guys teach CCW. I won't go, that's a different subject, but that's stuff that people don't take seriously enough. Or when they learn a tactic class, they take a SWAT tactic class and they don't take a home defense. So I appreciate what you guys are doing. Keep it up out there. I mean, this is the kind of stuff where I'm glad this is becoming more popular. You're in my own old home too. I was Somerset County, so I love that kind of stuff. I love to hear that New Jersey still training, as much as everybody doesn't think about it. New Jersey has a lot of shooting. I mean, I grew up shooting shotguns and rifles around New Jersey, so
Hey, the guys from Lou's Firearms said hi.
Well, yeah, there we go. See, Lou's in you would miss it in Raritan. It's hilarious. It's across from a Quick Check. It looks like a house, and it's in this old school part of Raritan. My 108-year-old, she'd be 109 this year. She died at 106, but she grew up in Raritan. My great grandma, my Italian great grandma, she grew up like a street down from where Lou's Firearms is. So there's this weird culture of shooting in the Northeast, as much as people don't think there is. So, hey, come out and find us. If you need anything, Wayne will be out I think you'll be out at Double Eagle. At least I know I'll see you and Daryl this year at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be out there.
And then the last thing I always tell everybody, not just you, Wayne, but the thing I tell everybody at the end of every podcast is don't forget to dry fire.